musicians have that creative spirit, but I think having a business is creative.
Exactly.
I feel a lot of satisfaction in having a business because there's so many things to create.
The following is a conversation I recently had with my friend Alison Suell. Alison is a violist and the owner and operator of Electria, an electric and acoustic string ensemble based in Kentucky. Electria is a busy operation. Alison is managing over 100 clients per year with dozens of musicians that she works with. Throughout this conversation, Alison and I discuss how she started her business, work-life balance with family, and the values and principles she uses to grow her network. I've known Alison for a few years now, and believe me when I say that she is the real deal and an inspiration of what it looks like to live a life of learning, serving others, being creative, and making goals happen. If you're interested in getting a raw understanding of the challenging and rewarding aspects of running a successful music performance business, then this conversation is for you. My name is Alison Legendre, and this is the Music Work Podcast. Please do enjoy. Thank you so much for being here today, Alison. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you as well. Thanks for being here. So let's just start back at wherever we need to get the story of how Electria came to be. So would you mind sharing with us a little bit about how you guys got started and what are some of the key events that led you to where you guys are now?
Yeah. Well, and I graduated college, and after college, it was kind of like, I think a lot of musicians feel this way. It's like, what do I do next? And about a year later, I decided to really buckle down on teaching and trying to get gigs. And I had a friend make a website for me because he was learning how to do that. And at the time, we didn't have things like Wix or Weebly or any of those other websites where you can build them yourself. So he made a website for me. He did a really nice job. And then I started getting my first gigs, and that was about 2011. And then a couple of years later, I got a phone call one day, and it was from this lady. She called me. She just moved here from Arizona, and she was starting an electric string trio. She had bought 2 violins and a cello and electric, and she was looking for a second violinist. And so she found my website, and that's how she found me. She was like, wow, your website's really nice, and I know that it says you play viola, but, you know, as violists, we often play violin. How do you feel about playing violin? And anyways, we clicked right away. We hit it off. I said, this sounds amazing. This sounds like so much fun to do the electric and play all the contemporary music. And so what we did is we met, and we really clicked, so we became business partners. And I played second violin for like the first year. And then I eventually got an electric viola. So, but what we did is we were partners for several years and worked on Electria together. And eventually I gave up my first business, which was Louisville Strings, and kind of that all merged in together as one business. And then I think about 2019, I took over the business completely for Electria, and because my partner, she just needed more stability in her life with a different path, and so she still plays with us. She's just more of she's just one of our players now instead of having the responsibility of the gigs and everything. So that's kind of been the journey.
Interesting. Okay, so we've known each other for a while, and I didn't even know that this Electria started out like merging with another group that you started, and that you guys were a partnership starting out. That's cool. What was the name of Electria, 1.0, the first version, then when it was you? I missed that.
Yeah, so when I started, it was called Louisville Strings, and then when we got together, she had already made a name for it, which was Electric String Fusion. But then, that maybe a year later or 2 years later, we got a guy that contacted us and say, hey, I have the name String Fusion trademarked, so you can't use that. Yeah, so we had to change our name, but I think
I like Electria. I like Electria way better. Like it's so
Yeah,
simple. It's like one of those, like, you have a good brand when it just clicks and it's just so obvious, yet it hasn't been thought of before. So I love what you guys landed on. I think that's super cool. So
thank you.
yeah, it's interesting being in an ensemble where you're starting with friends because I've been through a similar thing too, where it's just like, you make music together, your friends together, and then the transition to going, filling in the proper roles. What was that like navigating, finding like the right seats on the bus for everyone? Because I know that can sometimes be challenging figuring out what was that like? How'd you guys come to that decision?
When we were running it together for a long time, and we
Yeah.
had a lot of synergy. And that
Mm-hmm.
was the really nice thing about our partnership is that
Right.
we really came together when we had meetings. We would really think of like a lot of things to work on
Right.
and strategize and that's a really nice feeling to have because
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of things by myself.
Right.
And what changed, why I discussed with her about taking over the business really came down to availability, like the time
Mm-hmm.
availability. And
Right.
because she has 3 kids and she's trying to make a living and have stability, and um, she was teaching and she's also working at a shop. So it kind of got
Mm-hmm.
to a point where she didn't really have the time anymore to work on stuff, or it felt kind of like a pressure because she's
Mm-hmm.
very good at being there. She's always
Mm-hmm.
she's we've always had each other's backs, and that I think
Mm-hmm.
was part of what made our business really the partnership really work really well. Is that
Mm-hmm.
no matter what, somebody was gonna be there and take care of things if the other one couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a matter of taking that load off.
Right.
and, and since I was handling a lot of aspects of the business anyways, it made sense at the time. Um, and I would say she was glad to have a little bit of that pressure taken off, but still
Mm-hmm.
able to be a part of the group. So
Right.
she still gives me a lot of suggestions. Like we still talk about things, and
Right.
I take feedback from the group, and so I'm just thankful that we were able to navigate that change over. Um, but she's been a great partner and a great musician to work with all these years.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. That, making great music is the main thing. So to be able to stick with people that you love making music together through different seasons of life, and finding ways to make that work when things in life change, that's super cool that you guys were able to navigate that. So take us to where you guys are now. I mean, I know, but for the sake of our audience, you guys are real busy doing lots of things. Give us a little snapshot of the types of performances you're doing and what the calendar is generally like and what that all entails.
So we usually do around 100 weddings a year, a little over 100, and
Mm-hmm.
most of that is weddings, and then a good portion of it is corporate events.
Okay, well, that sounds like fun. Now, when it comes to the types of events you do, you all have both electric and you have acoustic. Tell us about the electric offer, what that looks like, and how you made that offer.
So our electric is the trio, which is the electric violin, electric viola, electric cello, and we play with backtracks. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the thing that makes us a little different from other people is that we're playing with the beat and the sound effects and all the stuff. So what how we sell it is that we tell couples and planners that we sound like the radio version of the song, but with
Mm-hmm.
strings instead of vocals.
Mm.
So it's a fun spin off, and it's kind of the backtracks add that extra bit of flair and energy, and really bring up the energy of the music that we play.
It looks like a lot of fun. I love watching your guys' videos of what you do. Does it take a lot of preparation to do that? Like, is it harder than the acoustic, or what are some of the pros and cons of doing that offer from a musician standpoint?
We do have harder music that we usually play for the
Okay.
electric. So we
Mm-hmm.
do our own arrangements and we make sure that they fit with the backtracks and that they make sense with the backtracks, that we're not doubling things unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So we do only have a smaller pool of people that we use for the electric because of that. because we want them to have a certain energy. We stand and perform when we do electric as well. So that's
Hmm.
different. We don't sit because we want to interact. We want to dance around a little bit, and then we have some of the music memorized, and then some of it's a little bit more complicated. So yeah, that is a little different from the acoustic side of the business. We get a little bit more, we take a little bit more liberties with getting creative. So that's not something that we can just come in and usually most people can't just come in and sight read that and instantly, be in a group with it.
Yeah, it's a different skill set, not like just sheet music and read it like classical music. I imagine it's a
Mm-hmm.
learning curve because I noticed that you usually have the same people in your electric offer. So I was wondering if it was more
Yes.
challenging for any specific reason. Do you write the arrangements for the electric trio then, or how do you guys get music and how does it fit to the backing tracks? Because that's like a mystery for me.
Well, we do write our arrangements. We write quite a bit of them.
Okay.
Um, so Zara, when we first started, that was my business partner.
Mm-hmm.
She had written quite a bit of the arrangements at first,
Mm-hmm.
and then I started arranging as well. And so we were doing a lot of them together. And every once in a while, when we were in a pinch, we would buy some music if we could find it. Now I do buy a little bit more often to save myself some time,
Mm-hmm.
but um, but yeah, most of the time we like to arrange our own music because we use tracks. And so if there's something that we don't want to double, like the bass line is like really strong in the track, we might take it out or we might have the cello do something else. And that's the nice part too, is that when we do our own arrangements, we can pass the solo around a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
because the bass line doesn't always have to be there in the cello part. Like the cello can take a lot more solos because the track is taking care of the bass line. So when you play acoustic with that, sometimes I change the arrangements if we're going to be playing them acoustically because the cello, when it drops out, sometimes it feels a little weird
Mm-hmm.
with certain songs. Not every song, works for some songs better than others, uh, but yeah, so that's why we do that because we want to make sure that we can do things that we wouldn't be able to do on the acoustic versions. Makes sense.
It does make sense, but it sounds like a lot of work. Like, is it a lot of work to make a new piece of music because you have to find the backing track and make sure that you have an arrangement that works or tweak the arrangement? Is that a bit of a tedious process? And how much time do you usually spend working on your repertoire?
It can be a little bit tedious, especially
Yeah.
some songs are um, harder than others to figure
Yeah.
out how to arrange them. So the nice thing about the tracks is that we can customize them and
Mm-hmm.
take out instruments or lower the volume on them. And so usually I download all the parts and then get on into Audacity and and just change all the parts how I want them to be. And then I usually read the score with it and make sure and kind of I listen to the song a lot sometimes
Mm-hmm.
and just visualize who should be playing what at what parts in the song. Like where does it sound like a natural change of instrumentation? And so it's a creative process and half the time I really like it and the other half of the time I'm kind of like want to pull my hair out. So but at the end of the day, when you worked hard on something and you have a result that feels really good and it's playable and makes sense and it flows, it feels really good. And then we use it for years and years and years.
Right. It's amazing to me that you handle all of these moving parts because I understand like being a range of doing in the hundred, like around 100 performances, but like I could not also arrange the music and handle clients and all this stuff. What does the pie look like of where your time goes? Like how much of it is working with clients and musicians and like the music aspect of it? And out of that, what parts would you say give you the most energy that you are kind of your favorite there?
Probably my favorite part is the booking of the gigs. And
Okay.
then, because I don't know, it just feels really exciting when I get an inquiry and then I take them through the process and then they say yes. That's really satisfying. So, and especially, getting the deposit, that's always fun. So,
Right.
uh, but the other part that I really like is on, performing the gig too, because especially when we do electric, that tends to be something that guests are like, they've never seen that before. And it depends on the crowd, of course. Not
Hmm.
everybody's the same. Some of them are a little bit more calm and reserved, and
Right.
you're just background music, and sometimes they're really intrigued by it and they're super excited and they're singing along with the songs. And those are my favorite kind of gigs, is when they're singing along with us and having a good time. So I do spend a lot of my time doing emails and the administrative work, basically taking clients through my booking funnel and then managing the gigs. And so I do have the seasons where it's like booking season is usually
Hmm.
the winter time, and where I'm sitting at my computer a lot, but I'm not playing a lot of gigs, but I'm on my work, on my computer working.
Right.
And then there's the fulfillment season, which is the wedding season, and then I'm busy playing a lot, and but then I'm doing a lot of work that week with whatever gigs I have booked, that I have other groups playing, and doing all the logistics, making sure everybody's where they're supposed to be and they know where they're gonna, what time they arrive and what music they're playing and anything weird, and making sure that timelines are correct. And um, so I guess the division of my time does shift over the year of what season we're in. And then as far as arranging music, honestly, at this point, I've gotten kind of behind on that because there's so much to do.
Mm.
Um, so I've forced myself to arrange music by having um, couples can now request songs. I kind of did what you did, which is I'm
Oh.
offering like a couple of free songs for them as, like,
Right.
part of our package.
Yeah, they'll
And
take
it's been
advantage
good
of
and
that.
bad.
Oh no.
Yes, it's been good because it's like forcing me to get new music. And
Right.
the bad part of it is, puts me in a, time crunch occasionally. So I do have a new member of our electric who he's taken over, as our main cellist in the group now,
Hmm.
and he's really interested in doing arrangements. So he's been actually adding a few arrangements recently, which has been really
Oh,
nice.
good.
So I'm getting a little extra help now.
Yeah, that offer to have like free arrangements in your packages, it's like people take advantage of it. Yeah, I should have warned you. But yeah, it is a double-edged sword. It's good because people, like, you keep your music up to date and you're kind of forced to get new things, but like the amount of logistics that goes around it is a lot more than you anticipate, especially because sometimes it's a lot harder than other times depending on what the request is. But anyway, sorry about that.
No,
I hope it's paying
you did
off.
tell me. You said it's gonna be a lot of extra work because a lot of people are taking advantage of it. But I'm like, you
Yeah,
know what? Sometimes it takes a little bit of a kick in the pants to be like, just go on and arrange it because somebody wants it now. And
right.
so it's been good. Once it's done, it's done. So that's the good part.
Did you raise your prices before you did
I
that
did.
one, or okay, good.
Yes.
I'm like, at least you got that down.
Yes.
It helps. Yeah, I did some split testing on what like offer if it actually changed, like having the free requests or no requests, and I tried like one free request and no and three free requests, and I barely saw a difference, but people do always get excited about it, so maybe the number doesn't matter as much, is one thing I discovered, but people appreciate it nonetheless, so sounds
Yeah.
like fun.
Maybe I
No,
should just
that's
make it one free request.
yeah. I've done it both ways. I didn't see much of a drop off, but okay, so to add a different dynamic, and you are doing all this management, taking care of all these things and taking care of people so well for Electria, but then you also have Highlands Music Academy and you're also a mama. So talk to us about what that looks like, how you think about balancing life and time, and how that works with your schedule and how you'd like to prioritize things.
Well, definitely being a mom is a huge part of this
Right.
because one of my goals when I had my son was I wanted to essentially be a stay-at-home mom,
Right.
and be there for him and raise him. And I didn't want to send him to daycare.
Mm-hmm.
And so working at home and teaching lessons in the evening worked for a long time. And
Right.
gigging on the weekends was fine because it wasn't, all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but good money for what it was. And I'm divorced now, but at the time when we were married,
Mm-hmm.
my son's dad would be home, on the weekends. He didn't work, so that's where it worked out with our lifestyle.
Right.
And he worked a night shift, so he was asleep during the day, but I would be,
Uh-huh.
awake during the day. And then I would teach in the evening, and that's when he would be awake, and then he'd go to work at nighttime. Um, so I knew eventually, though, that this was going to be a problem with when Marshall, that's my son, started
Mm-hmm.
school,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want him being at school all day, and then I'm teaching all evening, and I don't get to see him.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, for a while, what's going to change? Something has to change.
Mm-hmm.
I need a solution. Like I need something, a different balance in my work. And then that's when I had this pipe dream of having a music school, and I kind of thought it was a long off dream, and I wasn't sure when that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw on Facebook, one of my Facebook friends that owned a music school was selling it. And I was like, hold on a second. Like, she's selling her school. Like, let me see what she's selling it for. And I talked to her, and it was a manageable price for me that I could make work. And it was a number that I was like, I can figure that out, you know?
Right.
And, um, and I figured it was in my wheelhouse because I already worked with musicians for weddings and events. I've been doing that already at that point for 7 years. So I felt equipped to handle teachers and to
Mm-hmm.
work with, and especially since I teach anyways already, I felt like I can handle parents and students. And um, that was like uh, the thing that I didn't know that I didn't know, which was how much of a learning curve the school really was.
Oh, really?
And
How so?
it's just a different beast. I think
Right.
because of the way that it's more permanent thing,
Mm-hmm.
where like weddings and events, it's kind of like it's a point. Like everything comes to a point,
Mm-hmm.
and we fulfill the gig and then we're done, you know.
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
with students and parents and teachers, it's like it's ongoing. It's an ongoing
Mm-hmm.
relationship, and so kind of finding the balance with what makes everybody happy and enforcing policies and handling like all the different questions and things that pop up, was was a really big learning curve for me. Whereas with weddings, it's like I know what's going to be asked, I know what the groove is, I know what the common questions are. With the school, I felt like I was starting over from scratch again. Like
Right.
what are all the pitfalls?
Right.
um, so I feel like I've gotten a grip on it now. For the most part, I'm still always learning things, and the same thing with Electria. I'm always learning things, but the nice thing is that it has allowed me to stop teaching, so I don't teach anymore. And my son's going into fourth grade, and I'm home in the evening times for him, and my parents help with him a lot. And so when I'm gone on the weekends, he's with his dad, and and then during the week, if I have anything like a gig in the week time or something, my parents are there and help with him. So I'm really grateful to my family and um, to just the ability that I have at school, and that I've been able to create a life that still allows me to be an active parent at home. And um, so the nice thing about him being in school is that I can work during the daytime, and then I don't feel bad about whatever he's doing that I'm not paying attention, because I can get my work done, and then I can hopefully unplug in the evening time. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's been the biggest motivator, I think, is having a kid to work your
I
life
bet.
balance around.
Oh my gosh. Like I've always been impressed by you, Allison, but like now it's like, wow, like that's so I understand now why you're so good at like making things like happen for people because you make it happen for yourself and just making and taking care of people. And I think I see that in you a lot that you're so like you just have such a warm heart to take care of people and like with both your businesses. Do you find that like how did you know that you had a strength in that kind of just like taking care of people and like just like managing and just understanding how you can, you know, get people to work together? Did you always feel like that was a strength or is that something you discovered later on?
I think it's just something I came to learn
Yeah.
about myself, or I guess my nature. I don't think I really. have anything that required that of me up until
Mm-hmm.
I had my own business.
Right.
And I think it just comes from, you know, I like to try to make things work for people, and I want to,
Mm-hmm.
because I think about how I would feel. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really what comes down to a lot of times is, you know, people are not asking things because they're trying to be unreasonable for the most part. I think some
Right.
people, there's those few people who just they probably go through the world with combat boots on, but for the most part, I think people like they're asking questions because they don't know, or they're
Mm-hmm.
asking questions because or they want certain things done because they have a certain vision in their mind. And part of my job in both music lessons or with gigs is to help them realize their dream or to help them or to help guide them in kind of understanding what is possible. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, we can't play out in the rain.
Right.
It might be nice and sprinkly for you and you might think it's romantic, but that's not
Not gonna work.
realistic.
Right.
But also not just automatically saying no. And I would say that's one of my values, just in my life is kind of being a problem solver and thinking about, is there a really good reason why I should say no? Or is there
Mm-hmm.
something there, and I might say yes and then come to regret it and go, well, that's why I should say no, but now I have a reason or, like I have experience or I have a good reason why I would say no to something. So,
Yeah, that's the thing about being in this position, like between people, like even if you're a person who just likes to say yes all the time, like, sometimes it's just like you learn that you can't make everyone happy, but we can do our best. We can do our best to find the middle ground. And I know that you're really strong at, understanding different perspectives and pulling them together. So I'm curious when it comes to Highlands Music Academy, like doing this school and also Electria, how much of that works synergistically together and how much of it is like, is there ever a time of year? Because I can imagine maybe like there's less students in the summer, so it works to be doing more gigs during the summer, and maybe you find musicians that through both, and that kind of works synergistically together. So I can imagine some pluses, but is that true? Is there some things that kind of work well together, and are there other things that are like hard to make work together? What is that like for you?
well, I've realized that with Electria, because I would think of it as in like, we have our gig season, and I would, think that's my busiest time. But then when I start paying attention to the reality of it, I realize, I mean, even January, even though we hardly ever have any gigs in January here because it's
Mm-hmm.
winter, it's dark and gloomy, like people aren't, that's not our wedding
Right.
season. And but I found that in January I'm super busy still with Electria
Mm-hmm.
doing bookings. I might do
Right.
20 bookings that month.
Mm.
And and that's a lot of emails, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and then, but with the school, I'm having new students sign on at the time. Like January
Mm-hmm.
and August are the big rush times of the year
Mm.
for new students.
Right.
So there's not as much, I feel like all year long, there's not really any reprieve. Maybe July is usually my more dead month, but this month is surprisingly really busy for Electria. It's like the most gigs
Mm-hmm.
we've ever had in July. So the break that I would normally get at this time of the year, I feel like I'm not getting it this year.
Oh no.
So probably July and November like are really like probably for both businesses are probably the slowest months in general. But
Really, July, but
yeah,
not this July.
no. So it's kind of funny. Um, but actually with it's funny because at the school I don't well I have a lot of different types of teachers there, and so I don't really use them for my gigs. And
Mm-hmm.
um, because I hire only string players.
Mm-hmm.
So every once in a while, somebody asks me about a vocalist or a guitarist. At least I do have those connections. I could ask a
Right.
teacher and refer them or book them. Um, but yeah, surprisingly, that's where it just that's where it was different. That it surprised me about having the school versus Electria is how really different they are. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess the common threads that connect them is when I'm thinking about my brand promise or my values or systems, then there is some, connecting points there where I can apply that to both businesses, or if I learn advertising in one, I can do it, I can apply it to the other one. But yeah, there's still the kind of, even that is like, I might have different offers for the school that I would never do for Electria. So
Hmm.
yeah, I wish there was a little bit more
More
overlap,
crossover.
but
Right.
they are very different.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I bet that is a lot to handle, but if anyone can do it, I know it's you, Allison.
No,
Being able to
thanks.
keep it all under wraps. But it does sound like fun. Did you imagine that you would be a quote unquote like business owner and like into entrepreneurship when you first started in music? Did you see that as the path, or did it just kind of come about when you realized how your goals needed it to in order to make the your goals a reality?
I definitely always had a dream to be an entrepreneur. So,
Oh, cool.
my mom, when I was a little kid growing up, she had her own business for about 10 years.
Wow.
And I think that just really made an impression on me. And
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, when I grow up, I'm going to be a business owner. So I guess it was always there. I wasn't
Right.
sure how it was going to manifest. Um, one of my hobbies is sewing, and I
Really?
would make accessories. And in high school, I made my own prom dress. I made a few other people's prom dresses, and so I was really into it.
Right.
And at one point, I even thought after I graduated with my degree in music that I would go to fashion school and pursue being a designer.
Uh-huh.
But when I graduated, I was like, you know what? I just spent 4 years getting this degree. I spent my whole life playing music. Like, let me do something with this. And before
Mm-hmm.
I try, trying to pursue something else. And so that, I guess that's really what motivated me to become, have a business with music, was because that felt like the only solution, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody else was, they weren't just hiring me for gigs. and
Right.
and I guess at the time I didn't really understand how to get those gigs. So
Mm-hmm.
my solution was just, well, let me create the business. It's kind of like the whole like build it and they will come.
Right.
Was a little bit my mentality. Like if I make
It
it or
worked.
if I do it, they'll come.
Right.
Of course, over time it did kind of start off that way naturally. I remember I
Mm-hmm.
got my first gig and I said, "How did you find me?" And they were like, "Somebody mentioned you." In hindsight, I'm pretty sure somebody else had recommended a different group, but they found me, so
We don't want to tell that part. Yeah. That's so
so it
funny.
worked out. But
Right.
but yeah, just having a website. I mean, that was the biggest thing, is having a website to get the Louisville Strings started, which then led
Mm-hmm.
me to Electria. So I'm just grateful that I had it in the first place, that I made the connection to get this group, to get in and do the electric thing, because it's totally unique and
It's a hit.
really a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I didn't know that you liked sewing. That's so cool. I'm so impressed by that because it's like a lot harder than it looks. I've
Yeah.
tried and failed before.
It's got this
That's,
technical,
yeah.
creative side to it. Like, because I really
Yeah.
liked building, I liked making things that were really technical. And
Uh-huh.
so that's like accessories, it's like they
Right.
have to be exact measurements and things like that. And I had an Etsy shop, and I sold
No
like
way.
over 100 items on there. And
Really? Do you still have
yeah,
it?
no, it's long gone.
Oh.
But yeah, when I got to a point where I was like, I need to focus on one thing.
Right, right.
So I decided to set aside, my sewing and design business, and I put that in the back burner because I thought, let me get this music stuff going, and eventually I might come back to that. But 10 years later, I haven't gotten back to it yet. So I think I'm just now on the music path, and I'm good here.
Right,
So
right. Do you
maybe later.
ever do you ever sew for fun at all now, or is it just gonna be something you
Yeah,
get to
sometimes.
later? Yeah?
right now I don't have a sewing room anymore, so I kind
Mm-hmm.
of just usually bring it out if I need to sew something up or if I have a little project to do. Like I did help my niece make a costume, and that was fun because she was learning how to
Yeah.
sew. So that was probably the last time I actually had a big project that I worked on. It was a couple of years
Right.
ago. But yeah,
Right.
I still got it. So that's a good part. It's kind of
Awesome.
like riding a bike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is a huge because that makes sense because like I noticed that you had a good eye. Like let's just be honest, when it comes to selling music, like we live in a very visual world and like having an eye for aesthetics like goes a long, long way when it comes to selling because people are seeing you first, right? The website, the brand, it's everything before they hit play. So I understand like I see that pattern often and now I see it in you as well that you had an eye for aesthetics and I think that I don't know if you agree, but I think you're applying like those same skills of how to make a brand that makes sense and attracts people with Electria because I think you guys have pulled that off really well. But
Thank you.
no, no, that's super fun. Okay, well that
Yeah, I
was
think
that
I
was
think it all
interesting.
plays into itself because it's
Uh
like
huh.
I think a lot of musicians are have a little bit of that creative spirit.
Mm hmm. Mm hmm.
And, I've seen a lot of musicians who are also artists or, they have their other things that they're into. And I did that as well. I like to draw a lot. And I think it's that creative spirit that,
Right.
at least does help me in my business because I usually design my own stuff. And
Right.
I'm really picky about how it looks. So, um, but I think having a business is creative. I feel a
Exactly.
lot of satisfaction in having a business because there's so many things to create in it. And, even if it's creating a system or a process,
Yeah.
it's a creative process where,
Mm hmm.
you don't want to be creative every single time. Like you don't want to reinvent the wheel on every new inquiry, right?
Mm hmm. Yeah.
But it's creating the inquiry and thinking about the funnel and thinking about how to respond and
mm hmm.
setting it up. That's the creative process that I think satisfies that in me. So
Mm
yeah,
hmm.
having a business is fun.
It's true because yeah, I was kind of surprised too that I was interested in the actual mechanics of running a business too because it's super creative and I came from like similar interests as well, like liking the arts and music as well. And so being able to design a brand is one thing, but everything that goes in the business is also a design. It's something that you create, which is fun and it's like you got to learn once you can tame the side of you that wants to keep like changing things like if you're a
Yes.
creative person then you can actually like use something long enough to know if it works and then it's a pretty powerful skill set so yeah I think that's
You're
a
very
good thing for
right
a
on
musician
that.
hones yeah
I have the
yeah that's my
tendency to
problem
want to change things all the time.
yeah
And sometimes I'm like, especially at the school, I've changed things so many times at the school. And I have one teacher who's been there the whole time with me. Well, I have a couple, but this one teacher in particular, she always adapts whatever I change right away. And I'm like, so really thankful to her for that. But I'm like, when the last big change I made, I'm like, she's gonna be like, man, you changed it again, Abby. I said, I know that she'll just go with it.
right Yeah. I got in trouble for that a lot last year, especially
Oh,
until like
really?
some of my teammates told me just like, yo, like just like stop changing things so much. Like we're just people are just getting used to something, then I change it, like, oh, that file's here now. And it's like to me it's just like,
Yeah.
natural, but to other people they're like trying to keep up with my brain, which wasn't making things as neat as they should have been all the time. But
Yes.
yeah, I kind of make rules for myself. Like I need to be really consistent when it comes to business things. Like I can be creative, but then be consistent with it. But then when it comes to like, I love freedom. Like when I'm putting things away in the kitchen, I'm just like, I'm going to put this anywhere. Like I just don't put my mental energy to being consistent anywhere else. So I can save it all for the business. Just be consistent.
There
But
you go.
yeah, I don't know if that strategy is working. You can ask people around me. They probably won't agree, but no, that's fun. What do you think kind of drives you to pursue excellence? Because when I look at Electria and what you guys have a lot of excellence. And like you say, you're someone who likes to keep tweaking things and making the experience better for your clients and all of that. What do you think it is that makes you want to keep improving, would you say, and not just coast with where things are?
Well, part of it could just be, keeping things interesting too. It's
Right.
like, um, if I'm gonna do it, then I should do it well to the best of my
Mm-hmm.
ability, and that means that things are always going to be changing and being tweaked, and adapting with the times, and changing things. And sometimes I do it and I'm like, what did I get myself into? But when it's all said and done, I'm really glad that I did, because it when things are streamlined, or when I'm going for something to be great at it, or to have a really good system around it or something, it really makes you think about um, everything,
Mm-hmm.
how you communicate to people, how you organize things, and what you're using, and it streamlines things so that
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, it's less stress. So,
Right.
um, and this might sound a little cheesy, but when I was a kid, well, I guess a teenager, I remember
Mm-hmm.
my viola teacher told me to watch this video on the hyphens, and he gave me the cassette tape, or no, VHS tape, and I watched it, and it was this whole documentary about hyphens. And I remember he was playing ping pong with a student, and he's like, and from everything that he does, no matter what it is in his life, he strives for excellence. It's not
Right.
just on the violin; it's like everything. And I thought to myself, wow, that's the way to be.
Right.
So I guess it made an impression, because I always think about that in everything in my life. Like, how can I do it better? And I do have my shortcomings, like every what
Mm-hmm.
you just said. When you put your energy towards a business and some other things go by the wayside, I definitely have my
Yeah.
things. Physical organization is not my strong suit, but
Mm-hmm.
digital organization, or organization with gigs, is my strong
Mm-hmm.
suit, and that's
Right.
where the energy goes. So if you look at my
Absolutely.
drawers, sometimes they're organized, and half the time they're a mess. So
Right. Yeah. No, that makes no sense. And like it reminds me of a saying, I don't know who said it, but like anything worth doing is worth doing well. So it's like first
Mhm.
there's two parts of that. Like first is like choosing what's worth doing. Like if you're working on like if you realize something like, oh my gosh, like whenever I get this email, it stresses me out. Like anything if taking the time to solve that problem so that problem doesn't happen again, or like putting in some upfront work to solve problems as they come up so it creates a more stress-free future. Like that's a good thing to it's worth doing, so it's worth doing well so it doesn't keep happening. So yeah, I like that. I like how you're thinking about how you can make a better future for yourself and do things well in order to because that's the thing also with gigs is like you always are paying the consequences of decisions you make a year ago. So if like you're sloppy on one thing, it's like a year later, it's just like, oh, now we're late for a gig because I didn't catch that, or whatever it is. Like
Yes.
you always got to
Yeah.
think ahead. You kind of trains you to think ahead. Does any thing or book or person or anyone come to mind when you think of something that's been really influential and how you think about and growing Electria and how you think about business, anything like that?
Um, I I'm kind of a nerd, and with the books, because I
Right.
like all the nonfiction business books, or
That's awesome.
psychology, and
Yeah.
so I've always had an interest in that, and I think a lot of that has influenced the way that I think about things. Or um, you know, Dan Kennedy is a great example, because um, I guess my personality tends to be a little bit more soft and gentle, and that's the opposite of Dan Kennedy. So, I think sometimes reading his stuff helps me think about um, kind of, I don't know how to put it, like a harder view on things, like
Hmm.
he has a little bit more of a hard line about things. And
Right.
sometimes it's good for me to hear, and think about. And of course, I've had mentors in the area of the business, especially in the last few years. Like, you have helped me a lot with just I love reading your stuff or watching your podcasts, and
Oh, I'm
just kind
glad.
of seeing the things
Hmm.
that you're working on. Like, it gives me a lot of encouragement. and and so, yeah, and I think too, with the music school, I am a part
Hmm.
of some music groups. I have a membership to a program that was with has I have a coach, and
Hmm.
a Facebook group of everybody, like all these other music, studio owners,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of seeing what other people are doing, and having um, that mindset that comes with
Mm-hmm.
the coaching really
Right.
has molded me over the years. And
Right.
I'm just grateful that I have access to that because,
Right.
of the internet. I feel like,
Yeah.
even just 10 years ago or 15 years ago, like none of this would have just been at your fingertips the way that it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think for every musician out there, like if you're not connecting or finding people that are your niche, you that's going to be a problem.
Right.
There
Right.
it's so much opportunity to learn and grow faster. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, just seeing what's possible like is so important like when you're around other people because
Mhm.
like I remember I when I first started I kind of was kind of up and down in terms of what I thought was possible because at first I'm like, "Oh, this is great. I'm pretty sure I can get booked a lot." And sure enough, I got booked a lot. And then I'm like, oh, wait a second, let's do the math. Me making $100 a week isn't a lot. And then so I kind of went on a downscale, like, oh, maybe I can't make a living with this. And then I like realized, oh, people charge more than that. And then I went back on an upscale. So like you kind of learn like what's possible when you get around other people. And like I can just think back. And if there wasn't other people in my life at certain points, I just would have just stayed in one of those lows, like just lowering my expectations of what was possible. And then I would have just stayed there. But like if you get around other people and see what other people are doing, then it kind of opens up your mind to things. And uh, yeah, it's encouraging. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's been cool
exactly.
cool to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you put it perfectly, like seeing what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
even when I first got to school, I actually had a really small mindset around it. I just thought,
Really.
yeah, if I can make an extra 1,000 or 1,500 a month, like that sounds
Mm-hmm.
good, like,
Right.
um, and then I got a postcard for the program that I'm in, and it was like, um, schools that do 1 million in revenue a year. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not uncommon in this program of people
Mm-hmm.
who have like 7 or 8 or 100 students or thousands of students.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just knowing that was possible blew my mind. And I
Right.
thought, okay, I need to dream a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with Electria. Thinking about that with the school, I've always been thinking about like, well, how can I do that with Electria? Like, how can I,
Mm-hmm.
what's the point of expansion? And
Mm-hmm.
and so it's been really nice seeing what other people are doing because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're like, wow, there's a whole other approach I could take, or
Right.
world out there. I could charge a lot more.
Right.
When I first started, I think I was taking like a $50 commission on the gigs
Mm-hmm.
I booked. So it's
Right.
like $50 doesn't go very far.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was the exact same. It's funny how like even though like we weren't connected or anything, like the same story and you hear it often with people starting out. It's just like, oh, it can't be that much work. Like I'm doing the emailing, so how much do I charge for my emailing? But it's like completely
Yes.
wrong mindset because first of all, like you couldn't pay someone to do it for that amount, and second of all, the value of the business itself. So, yeah,
Yep.
it's cool to see that you kind of come to on the learning journey as well and that we were able to cross paths. It's funny how we're like alternate realities of ourselves.
Yes. And
But
we're both
that's fun.
Allison, so
I know it's so funny, like acoustic violin, electric viola, and
Mhm.
just so many similarities. But no, that's so cool. Now, change of direction here. What's the craziest thing or most memorable thing we'll say that's happened at a gig for you? Anything that's either like fun or not when it comes to a performance? Like anything memorable, like oh that was the best one or anything like that come to mind?
Definitely the best ones are, we play some corporate events and we play in some weddings where people just start dancing and they start singing, and
Right,
they want us to stay even longer, and
right.
so those are really nice. And we've had, a lot of those. So I have some really good memories in that respect. And we
Hmm.
recently even had one that was, they booked us just for an hour for cocktails, and
Yeah.
actually didn't have us booked originally. That's what the funny story is that they booked us for acoustic for the ceremony and
Hmm.
cocktail hour. And we played at another event the weekend before on Electric, this for a retirement party. And someone at the party says, "Hey, I think you're playing for my neighbor's wedding next weekend." And I said, "Yeah, we are." And because he told me the name and I recognized it. So I was like, "Yeah, we're playing that wedding." Um, and but they loved the Electric so much that at that event that I thought, this person, I wonder if he'll contact me and like change his
Right.
booking. And he did. A few days later, he goes, "So my neighbor saw you." And he goes, is this what we have booked? And I said, "No, you don't have that booked. But it
Right.
happens to be available because we had
Right.
a booking fall through actually for the Electric."
Mm.
So I said, it is available if you want to go for it." He asked me how much more. I told him, and which is a pretty big chunk of change more. But
Mm-hmm.
he said, he paused for a moment, he goes, "Let's do it."
Yeah.
And then he ended up wanting to book us for an extra 2 hours on top of that once we
That's
were actually
awesome.
playing for the cocktail hour. So when that happens, it makes you feel really good because you're like,
Yeah.
okay, they loved us so much that they're willing to pay the extra and they're willing to pay overtime. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. And as you know, probably one of my worst stories has to do, actually, I have two, but like the most recent one was
We all
playing
have
in,
them, yeah.
yeah, was playing in the snow for a wedding because I didn't have, uh, yeah, I always try to make it work at the end of the day. And so I told them, like, if you can get us a tent, if it can have sides and you can have it heated, I think we can make
Hmm.
it work. And
Right.
even then, it was still a little cold, so I just brought my electric
Right.
instruments because I didn't want
Uh-huh.
anybody risking their instrument. So I just said, "Look,
Right.
the electric will be fine. Let's just do
Right.
this, plug it into little speakers." And so we like played acoustic, but on electric.
Right.
So we didn't do any backtracks or anything. It was our
Hmm.
typical setup. But so it worked out. But they did have an open flame fire pit instead of
That's
like one of those
crazy.
normal heaters.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't have the cello like 1 foot in front of that. Like that's not gonna work.
Oh
So
my gosh.
um yeah, so that's probably one of the worst. And that definitely prompted me to fix my contract to be a
Right.
little bit more explicit about those things. But
About open flames.
yeah, no open flames and dry ground, no snow. So,
I know
and maybe
it's
not freezing
crazy.
temperatures, but
Yeah.
oh well, yeah. If they had asked me, like, we really want to have an outdoor wedding in the snow, and that was kind of part of like the potential plan or dream, I
Would have
might
changed
have,
things.
yeah, I might have changed things or like told them more explicitly like how we could make that work, because
Right, right.
I'm open-minded to that. I'm just not. I just don't want to be thrown into it.
Right.
Ideally.
It's crazy. Yeah, I don't understand it, but yeah, the requests for live music, like in the winter temperatures, it still blows my mind. But it's always tricky being that in between, trying to make it work for musicians. At least you were there to be able to make it work, because I know it's hard sending
Yeah.
out a team and they're in
Yeah.
a situation. They're like, "What do we do?" So I'm
Well,
sure
I
you
actually was
handled
going
it.
to be on another gig and I
Oh wow!
switched because
Just in case you had a feeling, spidey sense, right?
yeah, I was like, this is not gonna work. In fact, I called the violist. I said, so they would have their wedding outside. He goes, immediately, I'm not doing it. I said, well, I wasn't gonna ask you to do it. That's why I'm switching.
Right.
I'm gonna put you on the
Good call.
indoor one. Yeah, so that's part of just making it work.
Good call. So I know you have this superpower when it comes to building a network with what you've done with Electria. So maybe as we're just looking to wrap things up here, do you mind just giving some rapid fire tips of how you've been able to build a network and just become the go-to musicians in your area by getting to know the planners and venues in your area? Just what are some of those tips that you maybe can share to our listeners to get well known in your area and get those referrals coming in?
So one of the things I did ask all my musicians that usually play for me, I asked them for some
Mm-hmm.
feedback about what do they
Right.
like about playing for Electria, what do they think could be improved or wish we
Mm-hmm.
could do, and what do they feel like is different working with us. So
Mm-hmm.
for my network of musicians, kind of the general consensus was that they like that I use technology. So I use
Hmm.
Book Live for booking, and then
Right.
really love getting the text for the gigs and being able to accept or decline, being able to see all
Hmm.
the gig details, being able to do gig chat, be able to view the music in the portal and everything. So they like my use of technology. I use iPads. If they plan a gig with me, we're using iPads. If they have an iPad, I'll just share my library with them to their
Hmm.
iPad, and that way they have it for any gig that they play. And
Hmm.
so I've gotten a lot of comments about love the iPad, love the technology, makes things so much simpler. Um,
Hmm.
they like the pay, and they've said that the pay is competitive,
Hmm.
and they like how organized I am. So
Hmm.
I think those things really do help because they've complained about, in the past working with other contractors that there's a lot of disorganization or confusion or there's just not clarity. And they
Hmm.
like that I'm transparent, that I'm clear about things. Um,
Hmm.
and then as far as with making connections with vendors and and planners and venues and everything, it's just been a matter of being out there. And
Hmm.
I got my start. I got my first connections with them by doing bridal shows, and they would hear us, and then we play lots of events. And we one of my values with the business is to try to be as easy to work with as possible. So
Hmm.
I'm not, I don't have a bunch of rules and things that I tell people at the gate, like, this is how we operate and you need to fit within our perimeters. It's more like
Hmm.
if it comes up, then I'll address it. But that kind of comes off a little aggressive when you come to people and you're like, here's all my rules, they're not going to remember it anyways,
Hmm.
um, but just to if you see something that doesn't fit, just to
Hmm.
kindly express that to people.
Hmm.
And I got that feedback just about with hiring musicians as well. It's about, some people said that they like how I handle things or how I communicate, and I think planners appreciate that too. And because I know I appreciate it when a planner, has the attitude of kindness because
Hmm.
I'm sure we've all worked with planners or venues where they drew a really hard line in the sand and they were very rude about it. And
Hmm.
you're like, you're not even trying to work with me on this,
Hmm.
like how can we come
Hmm.
together? And that's where
Right.
that's where my mentality is.
Hmm.
Um, so don't be combative,
Hmm.
be workable. And so I do get a lot of referrals from planners because they like working with me. So,
Right.
and they like working with my musicians too. And because I hire a really great group of people, and that was one of the things too that they said they like working with other musicians is that, they feel like I hire well,
Hmm.
and they like the people who, that I'm getting new people in all the time, and I'm getting younger players, I'm getting people who are good at the style and
Hmm.
are good to work with.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of a whole holistic, you get good people, you get, then they're good with the planners, you're good to them, they're good to you. It's all synergy, you have a synergy with
Hmm.
them. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's kind of my, making connections with people because at the end of the day, people are going to work with someone that they know. And
Hmm.
so the whole adage, it's who you know. I really do believe that if they've worked with you and they know you, they are going to want to continue to work with you versus the unknown. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's been I
I
think a
love that.
huge part. Yeah.
Yeah. And it really is like when people hear this, when I say similar things too, it's like, it is as simple as it sounds, but doesn't mean that it's simple to execute. But like, brand is having a good reputation. How do you do that? By being a good job and being nice to work with. And that kind of catches on, right? Because you can't
Yes.
have, you can't grow a brand and get referrals if you have negative word of mouth working against you and the direction of your musicians or your like planner network. Like you need to have the compounding effect of positive word of mouth because that's how you can, actually get the referrals coming in. So it does come down to
Yep.
just nailing it, doing a good job while you're there and working with people and understanding people and finding
Hmm.
ways to make it work. And I love how, like, I stole that one from when you said, like, oh, one of our principles is like we just make things work. I'm like, oh, that's the right way to put it. Like, we make things work because, like,
Yes.
like, I had what I was saying before is like everything is. I still say this. I tell people, like, everything's great news because, like, someone asks for some, like, a client will ask for something that, like, we can't possibly do that, but we still find a way to do something similar. It's like, can't do that, but great news, we can do this, which is similar. So, similar idea, but I like how you put it that, like, we always make it work for both parties, because that's how you keep as many people happy as you can. But no, I love that. And I love what you're doing for Electria. I can't wait to see you guys continue to make more awesome music and continue to grow and, yeah, and continue being awesome. So thank you so much for being here, Allison. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And yeah, let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for having me.